There must be a mistake. The man said it the way people say things they already know are not mistakes at all. He said it while looking at Aaron Miles the way you look at a smudge on a white shirt, not with anger, not yet, but with the particular impatience of a person who expects the problem to simply correct itself. The cabin smelled of recycled air and the faint cedar of the man's cologne. Seat 3A, first class. 2 wide leather seats separated by an armrest wide enough to hold a drink and a judgment. Aaron had placed Zoe in the window seat, first the way he always did. Window seat meant one wall of protection between her and the world. She was 9 years old, and her right ear had been giving her pain for 6 weeks. The kind of deep canal infection that had already chewed through 2 rounds of antibiotics and now required a surgeon in Boston whose name Aaron had written on the back of his insurance card so he would not lose it. The surgery was Tuesday morning. This flight was Sunday afternoon. Aaron settled into 3B with the calm of a man who had learned long ago that the way you sit down in a seat can tell everyone around you exactly how much you believe you belong there. He sat down like he belonged there, because he did. He had the boarding pass in his jacket pocket, the confirmation email on his phone, and the letter from Children's Hospital Boston in the outer pocket of his carry-on. He did not take any of these out. He did not feel the need. The man in 2B leaned across the aisle. His suit was dark charcoal, fitted the kind of suit that costs more than Aaron's monthly rent. His jaw was angular, his silver hair close-cropped his watch, the kind with no numbers on its face as if time itself answered to him. "Excuse me," he said, not to Aaron but past Aaron toward the flight attendant making her way down the aisle. "Excuse me, there's been a seating error." The flight attendant whose name tag read Donna stopped. She was somewhere in her 40s with the practiced neutral expression of someone who had managed 1,000 small crises at 35,000 feet. "Can I help you, sir?" "These seats," the man said, and gestured with 2 fingers the way you gesture when you don't want to actually point but still want everyone to understand who you mean. "I'd like to know how this was allocated." Donna looked at Aaron. Aaron looked back at her with an expression that gave her nothing and asked for nothing. He had pulled the noise-canceling headphones from his bag and was fitting them gently over Zoe's ears. Zoe leaned her head against the window and closed her eyes. Her right hand found her father's forearm and held on. "I can review your boarding passes if there's a concern," Donna said carefully. "My concern," the man said, "is that first class has a process, a wait list, upgrade protocols. I've been on this route 40 times and I've never seen." He paused, choosing his next word with the precision of someone who knew exactly where the legal lines were. "This configuration." Aaron did not look up. He adjusted the foam cup of the headphone over Zoe's bad ear so it would not press against the inflammation. He checked that the volume on her tablet was low enough. Sir Donna said, "If you could show me your boarding pass." "I have a seat assignment," the man said. 2B. I'm not the one in question. His name was Bradley Knox. Aaron learned this later. At the time, the name did not matter. What mattered was the texture of the silence that followed the way the 3 or 4 first-class passengers who had been pretending not to listen now went just a little more still. Aaron finally looked up, not at Bradley, at Donna. "We're in 3A and 3B, he said. His voice was level without heat. "The passes are in order." Donna looked at the passes, looked at the seat assignments, and gave a small, efficient nod. "Everything looks correct, sir," she said, and this "sir" was directed at Bradley Knox. Bradley Knox did not respond. He pulled out his phone, typed something that he clearly intended people to notice him typing, and turned to face the front of the cabin. But not before one long, slow look in Aaron's direction, the kind of look that was not a glare, not quite because that would have been too honest. It was something thinner and more precise, an audit. A woman in seat 4A had watched all of this. Her name was Elise Grant, though Aaron did not know that yet either. She was in her late 30s, her dark suit jacket draped over the seat beside her, a legal brief open across her tray. She had looked up from the brief when Bradley Knox started talking and had not looked back down. Now her eyes moved from Bradley Knox to Aaron and Zoe, and something shifted behind them, not action, not yet just the quiet repositioning of a moral calculation. She looked back at her brief. Aaron settled into his seat. He pulled a dog-eared paperback from his jacket pocket, something about network architecture, the kind of technical reading that most people would find impenetrable and that Aaron found restful. He opened it to a dog-eared page. Zoe had fallen into the shallow, guarded sleep of a child in pain, her small hand still wrapped around her father's forearm. He did not move his arm. He turned the pages with his free hand and read, and the plane began its pushback from the gate. The route from Atlanta to Boston was 2 hours and 20 minutes on a clear day. The weather forecast had said turbulence was possible in the corridor north of New York. Aaron had checked the weather before they left the house. He had also checked it on the drive to the airport and once more in the boarding line, not because he was afraid of flying, but because he had spent 9 years of his adult life in rooms where weather was not an abstraction but a variable in a system that controlled whether human beings lived or died. Old habits. He had worked as an air traffic controller for the United States Army from his 23rd year to his 32nd, not at a civilian airport, in environments where the frequencies were encrypted, where the aircraft did not appear on civilian radar, and where a mistake in your verbal instructions could end a flight permanently and catastrophically. He had been good at it. His instructors had told him he was better than good, that he had an almost unnatural ability to track multiple vectors simultaneously and to deliver instructions in a voice that stayed calm regardless of what was happening in the room around him. That calm, they said, was not a skill that could be taught. You either had it or you did not. He had left the Army at 32, a mission in a mountainous corridor in a country he was not allowed to name in public. Even now, even years later, had gone wrong in a way that was not his fault and that he could not have prevented. He had done his job. He had done everything right. The outcome had still been wrong. He had spent 18 months afterward seeing a therapist twice a week, and the therapist had helped him understand that doing everything right and outcomes being wrong were two things that could coexist, and that the coexistence of those two things was not a statement about his worth. He understood that intellectually. On some days he felt it. On other days, it was just a sentence he repeated to himself until the static quieted. He worked now as a network systems technician for a hospital consortium in Atlanta, managing the infrastructure that kept electronic health records flowing between facilities. The work was methodical and largely invisible and deeply important, in the way that invisible infrastructure is always deeply important, and he was good at it, and it paid well enough that he could afford the apartment with the good school, district, and the noise-canceling headphones, and today, 2 first-class tickets on a flight to Boston. He had almost booked economy. He had looked at the prices, and then he had looked at Zoe, who had been sleeping badly for 6 weeks because of the pain, and he had booked first class because he wanted his daughter to have as much comfort as he could give her on the date she was flying towards someone, cutting open her ear. Zoe shifted in her sleep. He watched her face, the slight furrow of her brow, the way her lips parted around a shallow breath. She looked like her mother had looked when sleeping, and he let himself think that only for a second before he turned back to his book. Bradley Knox had flagged Donna down again somewhere over South Carolina. Aaron heard the exchange without turning around. "I'm just noting," Bradley said in the confidential register of a man who has learned to deliver insults with plausible deniability, "that the noise level back there has been distracting." Aaron had not spoken in 40 minutes. Zoe was asleep. "I'll check in with all our first-class passengers," Donna said. Her voice had a new quality to it, careful in a way that was different from her earlier careful. A kind of apologetic precision. She came by Aaron's seat. "Can I get you anything, sir?" "Water for when she wakes up," Aaron said. "She needs to stay hydrated." "Of course." Donna paused for just a moment. "I'm sorry," she said quietly enough that it wasn't a speech. Just 2 words. Aaron looked at her. "Don't be," he said. "You handled it right." Donna moved on. From seat 4, Elise Grant had watched this exchange. She had closed her legal brief. She was not reading anymore. She leaned forward. "Excuse me," she said softly enough that it was clearly for Aaron. "Is she okay?" Aaron turned. He took a moment to look at her, not suspiciously, just accurately. "Ear surgery in Boston," he said. "She's been in pain for a while. I'm sorry." Something in Elise's face opened. "My nephew had the same thing. The waiting is the hardest part." Aaron nodded. "She's tough," he said. "Tougher than she knows." He turned back to his book, but something in the cabin had shifted, and Bradley Knox, who had been watching this conversation with the expression of a man cataloging evidence, pulled out his phone again and held it at a slight angle that Aaron recognized. He was filming. Aaron did not react. He noted it. the way he noted weather patterns as data, as a variable to be tracked. He turned a page. He waited. The turbulence started 40 minutes north of New York, which was exactly where the forecast had predicted it. The plane shuddered, once dropped perhaps 30 feet in a pocket of unstable air, and the overhead bins rattled. Zoe woke up with a small gasp and gripped Aaron's arm. "I've got you," Aaron said. His voice was the same as it always was. "Count with me. 1, 2, 3. Zoe's breathing steadied. 4, she whispered. 5. "Good," Aaron said. "You're good." Bradley Knox gripped his armrests and did not film anything for several minutes. The plane leveled. The seatbelt light stayed on. The intercom chimed the pre-recorded advisory about remaining seated, the mechanical courtesy of aviation in moderate distress. Aaron checked the flight map on the seatback screen in front of him. They were over Connecticut. 42 minutes to Boston Logan. The weather pattern over Massachusetts showed a band of low pressure that had moved north faster than the morning forecast had predicted. He looked at the updated routing overlay and saw that the flight path had already been adjusted to arc east of the original corridor. He looked at this for a long moment. He recognized the adjustment. He understood what it meant and what it did not mean. He put his book away. Zoe was awake now, sitting up straight, watching the window with the concentrated attention of a child who has decided that looking at the thing that frightens her is better than not looking at it. "Dad," she said, "how do pilots know where to go when they can't see?" "They have instruments," Aaron said. "Sensors that tell them exactly where they are, what the air is doing, how high they are, and they have people on the ground talking to them, giving them information. What if the people on the ground can't talk to them?" Aaron looked at her. "Then the pilot knows enough to trust his instruments," he said. "He does what the instruments tell him until the voices come back." Zoe considered this. "Okay," she said. The intercom chimed again. But this time, it was not the pre-recorded message. It was a human voice, the first officer from the clip delivery, and the slight tremor that only someone who had spent years listening for exactly that tremor would have detected. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is First Officer Hayes. We're experiencing some intermittent communication interference due to weather conditions ahead. The flight deck is managing the situation. We ask that all passengers remain seated with belts fastened. We'll update you as the situation develops." Aaron was very still. Interference, not loss of signal interference. The word was specific. The word was chosen. Interference in the North Corridor band meant the VHF frequencies were compromised, which meant primary ATC contact was compromised, which meant the crew was either on backup UHF or working blind intervals between contact windows, and if they were working blind intervals in a low-pressure system with an east-arcing adjusted flight path. He stopped thinking in sentences. He started thinking in geometry. He looked at the flight map again. He looked at the routing arc and the weather overlay and the altitude readout and the timestamp, and he did the geometry the way he had done it for 9 years in rooms where the math mattered, and what the math told him was that the crew had approximately 19 minutes before they hit the densest interference band, and during those 19 minutes, they needed to either establish contact with Boston Center on a secondary frequency or descend below the interference ceiling. And if they were already adjusting the arc to avoid weather, then descending was not straightforward, and the intercom chimed a third time. This time it was not the first officer. The voice that came through was different, older, controlled in the way that very experienced pilots are controlled, not because they are unafraid, but because they have practiced being controlled so many times that it has become the outer layer of their personality. "This is Captain Briggs. We have a temporary communication gap with Boston Center and are working to re-establish contact via secondary channels. All flight systems are fully operational. We are not in an emergency situation. We are, however, requesting that any passenger with air traffic control experience or formal aviation communication training please identify themselves to a crew member immediately." The cabin was absolutely silent. Aaron heard Zoe exhale beside him. He heard Bradley Knox say something under his breath that was not quite a word. He heard Elise Grant, 3 rows back, say quietly, almost to herself, "Oh." Aaron unclipped his seatbelt. He stood. Donna was coming down the aisle before he was fully upright, and she looked at him with an expression that was trying to be cautious and professional, and that was not fully succeeding at either. "Sir, we need passengers to remain." "I heard the announcement," Aaron said. His voice was the voice he had not used in 12 years. It was not loud. It was not urgent. It was something more specific than either of those things. It was precise. It was the voice of a man giving you information that is going to keep you alive, and it did not need to announce itself because that quality was simply present in it, the way a tuning fork is present in a note. I have 9 years of air traffic control in military encrypted communications. Tell Captain Briggs I'm available. Donna looked at him for 1 full second. Then she turned and walked toward the cockpit. Elise Grant had unbuckled her own seatbelt. She was standing. I'm an aviation law attorney, she said, not loudly directed at the general space between herself and Donna's retreating back. If there's a liability or procedural question about bringing a civilian into the flight deck, I can advise. My bar card is current. I'll have it ready. Donna did not stop walking, but her pace changed. Bradley Knox had gone very still. His phone was on his knee face down. Zoe looked up at her father. Dad, she said. Is this like what you used to do? Aaron looked at her. He reached out and straightened the headphones around her neck, not on her ears, yet just around her neck. It's exactly like what I used to do, he said. I need you to sit here and count for me, okay? Count. Nice and slow. Can you do that? I can do that, Zoe said. I know you can. Donna returned in 2 minutes. Her expression had changed. Captain Briggs would like to speak with you, she said. And then, more quietly, he said to ask, is this Miles, Aaron Miles out of Fort Gordon? Aaron felt something move through him that was not quite a feeling he had a word for. The recognition of a thread he had thought was cut still, attached at its other end to something real. Tell him yes, Aaron said. The cockpit of a commercial aircraft is a smaller room than most people imagine. 2 seats facing a wall of instruments, the windshield above them showing nothing but cloud and the steel gray light of a system moving fast, the smell of electronics and the particular focused atmosphere of people performing a task that has no margin for error. Captain Nolan Briggs was in his late 50s with close-cropped gray hair and the compact, settled posture of a man who had spent 30 years doing difficult things in confined spaces. His first officer, Hayes, was younger, late 30s, a clean bandage along his left temple where he had caught the edge of the instrument panel during the first hard turbulence drop. The blood had been cleaned up, but the bruising was already showing around the white gauze. Briggs turned when Aaron stepped in. He looked at Aaron for a long moment, the look of a man searching his memory for a face that had lived there for 12 years as something other than a face. Miles Control, Briggs said. His voice was steady, but not in the practiced way, in the involuntary way, the way of a man who is relieved in a manner too large for the word relief to fully contain. Briggs, Aaron said. They did not embrace. This was not the moment for that. They looked at each other for 2 seconds with 12 years of something unspoken between them, and then Aaron looked at the instruments and said, "Walk me through your contact status." Briggs walked him through it. Primary VHF was intermittent interference pattern consistent with the weather system's electromagnetic signature, which Aaron recognized because he had documented a nearly identical pattern in a mountainous corridor on the other side of the world in a different life. Backup UHF was operational, but Boston Center was responding on partial intervals, only they were getting through but not reliably. And the most recent contact had been 3 minutes and 40 seconds ago. The next reliable contact window based on the interference cycle Briggs had been tracking was estimated at 8 to 11 minutes out. "What do you need from me?" Aaron said. It was not a question. "I need someone who can read secondary coordinates off the backup system and relay to Hayes while I manage descent," Briggs said. "My first officer has a concussion. He can function, but he's missing a beat at high information load." Aaron looked at Hayes. Hayes looked back at him with the direct, undefended gaze of a man who knows exactly what his limitations are and has decided that honesty is the only thing that helps right now. "I'm tracking," Hayes said, "but slower than I should be." "I'll read," Aaron said. He sat in the jump seat behind Briggs and pulled the backup communications console forward. The display was military-grade, older than the civilian system, but familiar to him in the way that all encrypted backup systems shared a logic, a grammar, the same bones in different skin. He put on the headset. The static was immediate and familiar, the white noise of interference, the occasional burst of clarity through which you could hear the shape of a voice even if not the word. Aaron listened to it the way a doctor listens to a chest through a stethoscope, with the full attention of someone who knows that what they are hearing contains information the ordinary ear cannot extract. He found the window. 11 seconds of clarity in a 60-second cycle, that was the gap. 11 seconds was enough. Boston Center, this is Delta Flight 479, he said. His voice was exactly what it had always been. Nothing extra. Nothing absent. The voice of the job. We are on backup UHF frequency 225.7. We are declaring a precautionary advisory, not emergency. Request routing confirmation on current arc and descent clearance to flight level 180. Please respond in next contact window. He released the transmission key. He counted. The static filled the space. The plane moved through cloud. At the 40-second mark, the response came through. Partial clipped, but enough. 479 Boston Center copies. Routing confirmed. Descend at pilot's discretion to flight level 180. Maintain current arc. Next, full contact window estimated 4 minutes. Squawk 4361. Aaron relayed the squawk code to Hayes, who entered it. He relayed the descent clearance to Briggs, who nodded once and began the adjustment, and the plane's nose tilted by a margin that most passengers would have felt only as a slight change in the pressure in their ears. Zoe in seat 3A pressed one small hand to her right ear and kept counting. The next 16 minutes were the most technically demanding 16 minutes Aaron had experienced since he had left the Army, and they were also the quietest. There was no drama in them, no raised voices, no visible crisis. From the passenger cabin, what you would have seen if you had been watching the cockpit door was nothing at all. What was happening behind it was the careful, methodical management of a communication gap in a weather corridor by 3 people who each knew exactly what their role was working, in the compact grammar of people who respect each other's competence enough not to waste words on anything that isn't information. At 9 minutes in full VHF contact was restored. Boston Center came through clean and continuous, and the voice on the other end was professional and calm in the way that controllers are always professional and calm, which is a particular kind of calm. Not the calm of someone who is not afraid, but the calm of someone who has decided that calm is a form of help. Flight 479, you are cleared direct, Logan. Expect runway 22 right. Welcome back. Briggs exhaled once through his nose quietly. Aaron removed the headset. He set it on the console with the careful deliberateness of someone completing a thing properly, not dropping it. You're clear, he said to Briggs. Briggs turned in his seat. He looked at Aaron with an expression that was doing several things at once. Gratitude, something older and more complicated. The particular look of a man who has been thinking about someone for a long time and is now sitting 3 feet from him and doesn't have the right words prepared. 12 years ago, Briggs said. A valley I can't name. I know the one, Aaron said. I thought that voice was going to be the last thing I heard Briggs said. That calm voice. I thought at least I'll have that. At least I won't hear panic. Aaron said nothing for a moment. You did everything right, he said, finally. You always do. You just needed the information. Briggs nodded. He turned back to his instruments. His hands moved through the pre-landing checklist with the muscle memory of 30 years. His shoulders, Aaron noticed, had dropped an inch from where they had been when Aaron first walked in. Go sit with your daughter, Briggs said. Aaron stood. At the cockpit door, he paused. Her name is Zoe, he said. She's got surgery on Tuesday. She's been counting to stay calm the whole flight. Briggs heard this. He did not turn around, but his hands stilled on the checklist for exactly 1 second, and then they moved again. Boston Logan came through the windshield as the cloud broke the harbor first, then the runways, then the geometry of a city spread out below a clearing sky. Aaron walked back through the cabin. He did not look at Bradley Knox. He sat down in 3B, and Zoe turned from the window and put her head against his arm. You did it, she said. We did it, Aaron said. Briggs did it. You did it too. How high did you count? Zoe thought about it. 247, she said. That's a lot of counting. I know, she said. She turned back to the window and watched Boston come toward them, close and real and full of hospitals and surgeons and the specific next chapter of a 9-year-old's life. Dad, she said, when I grow up, can I learn to do what you do? You can learn anything, Aaron said, but you've already got the most important part. What part? You know how to be calm, he said. You know how to count. That's the whole job. The landing was smooth. The runway met the wheels the way a good landing always does, not with a thump, but with the quiet insistence of 2 things finding each other. The cabin exhaled. Someone in the back began to cry, not from fear, but from its release, the kind of crying that doesn't have a specific target and doesn't need one. Elise Grant was crying too, just slightly, in the controlled way of a woman who does not consider herself a person who cries. She pressed her fingers briefly to the corner of her eye and then looked at the seat back in front of her as if daring it to comment. Bradley Knox had not said anything for the last 40 minutes. The plane taxied. The captain's voice came through the intercom, Briggs, not Hayes, which was itself a small statement. Ladies and gentlemen, we've landed at Boston, Logan. I want to acknowledge that a passenger in the first-class cabin provided expert communication assistance during our weather delay. That assistance was material to our safe routing. I'll leave it at that. On behalf of the entire crew, thank you. He did not say the name. He did not need to. The cabin was quiet. Then it was not. The applause started somewhere in the middle rows, where the fear had been most visible, and it moved forward and backward simultaneously, and it was not the polite applause of an audience appreciating a performance, but the real applause of people who are grateful to be sitting in their seats, who are grateful to be breathing, who are grateful in a way that they cannot fully articulate, and so they put their hands together because that is the only instrument they have. Aaron sat with his hands in his lap. Zoe put her small hand over his. At the jet bridge, Bradley Knox was waiting, not intentionally, but because the aisle had been slow to clear, and he was standing 2 people ahead of Aaron when the flow stopped. His carry-on was over his shoulder, his phone in his hand. He did not look back, but he did not move forward either, and in the stillness of the jet bridge, the narrow corridor between the plane and the terminal, the fluorescent tubes overhead, the smell of rubber and recycled air, something in his posture changed. À compression, à contraction. He turned. He looked at Aaron. Whatever he had prepared to say, if he had prepared anything, did not come out. My daughter needs surgery in the morning, Aaron said. Not as an accusation, not as a guilt trip. Just as a fact that the man in front of him did not possess and perhaps should. She's been in pain for 6 weeks. I bought first class because I wanted her to be comfortable, that's all. Bradley Knox looked at Zoe. Zoe looked back at him with the clear, unblinking gaze of a child who has not yet learned to perform anything. I'm sorry, Knox said. The words came out smaller than he clearly expected them to. He had the look of a man for whom apology was an unfamiliar garment put on in public not quite fitting. Aaron nodded once. He did not accept the apology in the loud sense, did not embrace it, did not give Knox the absolution he was perhaps seeking. He just nodded the way you acknowledge a fact. And then he moved forward because the jet bridge had cleared and there was a terminal ahead of them and a hotel and a surgeon's name on the back of an insurance card. Elise Grant was waiting at the gate. She had passed through ahead of them but had stopped, which cost her something. She had a flight connection, she said, and she was going to miss it, and she had decided it was worth missing. She held out a business card. Aviation law is what I do, she said, but I have colleagues in patient advocacy and healthcare billing. The hospital you're going to, I've worked with them. If there's anything on the back end, paperwork, insurance, lag billing disputes, call me. Aaron took the card. He looked at it. He looked at her. You didn't have to do this, he said. No, Elise said. I know. She looked briefly at Zoe. Good luck Tuesday. Thank you, Zoe said politely with the formal sincerity of a child who means it. Elise walked away toward her gate. She was already on her phone, but it was not the phone of a person doing important business. It was the phone of a person rescheduling, rearranging, deciding that something she had done was worth the disruption to her itinerary. Donna, the flight attendant, came through the gate 20 minutes later with the rest of the crew. She saw Aaron and Zoe sitting at the gate, Zoe eating a granola bar with focused deliberateness. Aaron on his phone, his eyes moving between the screen and his daughter with the constant low-level monitoring of a parent whose vigilance is so routine it looks like rest. Donna stopped. The hotel, she said, sent a message through the airline. Your room's been upgraded. It's apparently Captain Briggs called ahead. Aaron looked up. He didn't want me to make a thing of it, Donna said. So, I'm not making a thing of it. She paused. He also said to tell you, and these are his words, not mine, that he still counts sometimes when things get difficult, that he learned that from a voice on a radio and he's been doing it ever since. Aaron was quiet for a moment. Tell him Aaron said that my daughter counts too. The hotel room was on the 14th floor and faced the harbor. Zoe stood at the window for a long time, looking at the water, which was dark green and full of small moving lights. The running lights of boats, the reflections of a city going about its business beneath a sky that had cleared after the storm. She pressed her palm to the glass and then pulled it away and looked at the fog print it left. "Dad," she said. "Yeah. Were you scared on the plane?" Aaron considered the question with the full attention it deserved. "Yes," he said, "but you didn't sound scared." "No," he said. "I've practiced not sounding scared for a long time." "Does it help?" she said. "Practicing, yes," he said. "But not because it takes the fear away, because it keeps the fear from getting in the way of the job." Zoe turned from the window. "I was scared too," she said, "but I kept counting." "I know," he said. "I heard you." She had not been speaking loudly enough for him to hear. He had simply known, which is a different thing and also somehow the same thing. He tucked her in at 9:30, her bad ear on the pillow that did not press against it the white noise machine from his carry-on. He never traveled without it running its steady neutral sound. He sat on the edge of the bed until her breathing slowed and her hand relaxed around the edge of the blanket. Then he sat at the small desk by the window for a long time, looking at the harbor, not reading anything, not doing anything, just being in the room with his own history, which was large and complicated and full of things he had not chosen and things he had. He thought about a valley he was not allowed to name. He thought about a young pilot's voice on a frequency thin with controlled panic, and his own voice going out to meet it, not with reassurance, not with false certainty, but with the one thing he had always been able to offer: the next piece of information. One instruction at a time, one breath at a time, one number at a time. He thought about a 9-year-old who had counted to 247 while her father sat in the cockpit of a plane navigating through weather. He thought about all the ways a person can be useful in the world without anyone knowing what they carry. The next morning, in the offices of Delta's Boston operations, 2 complaints were formally filed and processed. The first was a passenger conduct report submitted by Donna and countersigned by Captain Briggs, documenting the verbal harassment and filming of a passenger in seat 3B by the passenger in seat 2B, who was identified as Bradley Knox, a frequent flyer whose status the complaint recommended for review pending investigation. The second was a safety incident report, standard procedure following the communication advisory, which included a full account of the event and the role played by the civilian passenger in seat 3B, identified as Aaron Miles, in facilitating safe communications during the Beck interference window. Bradley Knox received a call from Delta's customer relations office that afternoon. His account was flagged for investigation. His elite status, which he had held for 11 years, was suspended pending the outcome. He was told that filming other passengers without consent and attempting to have them removed on grounds that amounted to discriminatory harassment were violations of the carrier's policy and potentially of federal law, and that he would receive a formal letter detailing the finding. He did not respond publicly. He did not post anything. He put his phone down on his kitchen counter when he got home and left it there for a long time. Captain Nolan Briggs completed a formal statement for the airline's Incident Review Board, in which he noted in the careful language of official documentation that the passenger's intervention had been instrumental in maintaining contact with air traffic control and that he recommended the passenger be recognized by the airline. He also wrote in his personal log, which no one would read but him, a shorter entry. Miles was there, both times. "Some people you're meant to know. The surgery on Tuesday went well. It was a routine tympanoplasty," the surgeon explained afterward, the word routine being relative to what she did every day, which involved the delicate repair of human tissue, but which in Zoe's case went cleanly and without complication. And Zoe woke up from anesthesia asking whether the surgery was over and looking faintly annoyed when they told her it had been over for 40 minutes. She had been counting while she went under the anesthesiologist, told Aaron. The woman had said it with a small smile, the smile of someone who had seen many things in operating rooms and still found some of them worth remarking on. "She got to 31, she said, and then she was out." Very calm. Aaron stood in the family consultation room and looked at the beige wall across from him and felt something move through his chest that he did not immediately have a word for. It had the texture of relief, but it went deeper than relief. It had the weight of a debt paid to something. He could not name the specific private accounting that a parent keeps in their chest, the ledger that records every time the world did not take from you the thing you most could not afford to lose. He sat down. He pressed the heels of his palms against his eyes for a moment. He breathed. Then he took out his phone and called Elise Grant's number, which he had saved the previous night. "She's out," he said when Elise answered. "Surgery went well." A pause. That's good news, Elise said in a voice that had shed several layers of professional caution since the jet bridge. That's really good news. You missed your connection, Aaron said. I caught a later flight, she said. It was fine. I'm going to need your help with the billing, Aaron said. If the offer is still good. The offer is still good, Elise said. Send me whatever you have. We'll work through it. He thanked her. He ended the call. He sat in the consultation room for another few minutes in the beige quiet of a hospital corridor on a Tuesday morning in May, listening to the sounds of the building around him, the low hum of ventilation, the distant intercom, the specific institutional hush of a place where people come to be made. Well, he thought about what it means to carry something for a long time and not know if you will ever have the chance to use it again. He thought about the way competence lives in a body even after the body has stepped away from the work, the way the hands remember, the way the voice remembers. He thought about a man in a cockpit named Briggs who had been carrying 12 years of something parallel to what Aaron had been carrying, and about the strange symmetry of two people finding each other again at the exact moment the work needed doing. He did not think about Bradley Knox very much. Knox was a variable that had been resolved. The world contained him, and the world contained the consequences of what he had done, and those two things were now in conversation in a way that did not require Aaron's attention. What required Aaron's attention was down the hall behind a recovery room door, waking up from anesthesia, and asking questions about whether the procedure was over. He stood up. He walked down the hall. He pushed open the door. Zoe looked up at him from the pillow. Her hair was pressed flat on one side, and there was a small white dressing over her right ear. She looked like herself, entirely specifically herself, and this was the only thing that mattered. "Hi, Dad," she said. "Hi, Bug," he said. "It's over. It's over." She considered this. "What number did I get to?" 31, he said. She frowned. "That's not very many." "It was enough," he said. He sat down in the chair beside her bed. He took her hand. It was exactly enough. There is a particular kind of quiet that settles over a person when they have done the thing they were built for, and the world has received it, and the receiving has been enough. It is not the quiet of emptiness. It is the quiet of completion, not an ending, but a breath between efforts, the silence that exists between one measure and the next. Aaron Miles did not need a first-class seat to prove that he belonged anywhere. He did not need a title or a uniform or a formal credential displayed in a moment of crisis to justify his presence on a plane. Those things were true of him, the history, the training, the 9 years in rooms where the math mattered, but they were not the source of his belonging. They were simply what he carried, what he had always carried. The world will sometimes require you to prove yourself before it treats you as worthy of the space you occupy. This is not a fair requirement. It is not a just one, but there will be moments unexpected, unasked for, arriving without ceremony, when everything you have carried for years becomes exactly what the room needs, when the voice that you have maintained through grief and discipline and the long practice of calm becomes the voice that tells a pilot where to go. Those moments do not redeem the injustice that preceded them. They do not erase what Bradley Knox said or what he filmed or what he believed, but they tell a different story about who is in the room, about who has always been in the room, about what the room contains that it cannot see. Zoe counted to 31 and went under and woke up on the other side. Her father counted for 30 years and went in and came out. Some counting is preparation. Some counting is the work itself. Sometimes you cannot tell the difference until it is over. What matters is that you know your count, that you keep it steady, that when the frequency clears and a voice comes through asking for coordinates, yours is the voice that answers. Exactly that. Nothing less.